My name is Ethan Walker, and my sister's engagement party was the last place I expected my past to catch up with me. The ballroom was full of laughter, champagne glasses, and relatives pretending to care. My younger sister, Olivia, stood glowing beside her fiancé, soaking in every bit of attention. I stayed near the wall. That's where I'd always belonged in my family, quiet, unnoticed, unimportant. Growing up, my parents never said it directly, but I felt it every day. Olivia was the achiever, the dream child. I was just there, the one they assumed wouldn't go far. So when I moved out at 19, no one tried to stop me. I struggled alone, worked endless hours, failed quietly, learned smarter, not louder. And slowly, without telling anyone, my life changed. Halfway through dinner, Uncle James stood up. He was the kind of man who loved embarrassing others for entertainment. Successful on the surface, insecure underneath. He lifted his glass and looked straight at me. "So, Ethan," he said loudly, "is it true you own a $1.5 million house?" The room froze. Music stopped. Conversations died. All eyes turned toward me. I didn't answer. I looked at my parents instead. My mother's smile vanished. My father avoided my eyes. They weren't shocked. They were exposed. That's when I understood. They already knew and chose to stay silent. Uncle James laughed. "Come on, kid. Just a yes or no." I took a breath. "Yes," I said. "It's true." Gasps echoed across the room. Olivia turned toward me, stunned. "What? Since when?" "Since a few years ago," I replied calmly. My mother whispered, "Why didn't you ever tell us?" I met her eyes. "Because," I said quietly, "you never cared to ask." And silence just like after that, my words felt heavier than the music stopped ever feeling had. Like a celebration. People shifted in their seats, unsure whether to look at me or pretend nothing had happened. My sister Olivia kept staring, like she was trying to recognize a stranger wearing my face. Uncle James cleared his throat, forcing a laugh. "Well, that's impressive," he said. "But owning one house doesn't make you rich." I nodded slowly. "You're right," I said. "It doesn't." Then I reached into my jacket pocket and pulled out my phone. I didn't say it was one house. Murmurs rippled through the room. I turned the screen toward the table closest to me, property documents, rental summaries, clean spreadsheets I'd memorized by heart. 7 properties, I continued calmly. 2 commercial units. All cash flow positive. My mother gasped. My father finally looked up. "No loans?" he asked. "None," I replied. "No cosigners. No help." Uncle James' smile disappeared. Olivia stood up slowly. "You're serious?" she asked. I nodded. "I've been serious my whole life." Her voice softened. "Why didn't you ever tell me?" I paused. "Because every time I tried to talk about my goals," I said, "I was told to be realistic." The words hung in the air. My mother's eyes filled with tears. "We just wanted you to be safe," she whispered. I met her gaze. "I was never unsafe," I said. "I was just unsupported." Uncle James tried to regain control. "So what? You just expect applause now?" I shook my head. "No," I said. "I didn't build my life for applause." I looked around the room, at the same relatives who used to whisper about my failures. I built it so I'd never have to explain myself again. No one clapped. No one laughed. They just listened. Later that night, the party ended early. People made excuses. Smiles felt forced. The spotlight had shifted. As guests left, my father approached me. "We didn't know how hard it was for you," he said quietly. "But it explains it." "I know." Outside, that doesn't Olivia joined me near the entrance. "No, I agree. I'm proud of you," she said. I wish I'd said that sooner. I smiled, small but real. "Me too." As I walked away, I realized something important. Success doesn't need an announcement. But when it finally speaks, it speaks loud enough for everyone to hear. The days after the engagement party were quieter than I expected. No calls. No messages. No sudden apologies. Just silence. Then, 3 days later, my phone rang. It was my mother. I stared at the screen for a long moment before answering. "Ethan," she said softly, "your father and we need to talk." We met at a small cafe near my office, neutral ground, like strangers negotiating peace. My parents looked older, tired. For the first time, they weren't speaking as authority figures. They were speaking as people who realized they had lost control. We made mistakes, my father admitted. We focused on Olivia too much. My mother nodded quickly. We didn't think you needed us. I leaned back in my chair. That's the problem, I said. You decided what I needed without ever asking. They exchanged a look. Then my mother lowered her voice. There's something else, she said. We're behind on the house payments. I waited. And? I asked. My father swallowed. The bank might take the house. There it was. Not regret. Fear. I see, I said calmly. My mother reached across the table. We're not asking you to give us money, she said quickly. I raised an eyebrow. Then what are you asking? My father hesitated. A loan, he said. Just until things stabilize. I looked out the window. This was the moment I had imagined during the hardest nights of my life. The moment they finally needed me. But revenge suddenly felt empty. I'll help, I said finally. Relief flooded their faces. But I continued. On my terms. They froze. No secrets. No guilt. No control, I said. And this is the last time money defines our relationship. My father nodded slowly. That's fair. Later that evening, Olivia called. They told me everything, she said. I didn't know it was that bad. I know, I replied. There was a pause. Are you angry? She asked. I hope one day we can be a real family. No, I said honestly. That night, I stood alone in my living room, floor-to-ceiling windows, through the phone. City lights below. I thought about how far I'd come. Not to impress. Not to dominate. But to be free. Because helping my parents isn't making others feel small, but it's choosing who you help. For the first time in my life, needed their approval the power dynamic was different, not because I had money, but because I had boundaries. I refinanced their house through my company. No handouts. No lectures. Just a clean solution. They signed the papers quietly, like people who finally understood the cost of their silence. My father looked at me and said, You've become the man I should have believed in. I nodded. Belief would have helped, I said. But it wasn't required. A week later, Olivia's engagement photos were posted online. This time, I was in them. Not standing in the back. Not cropped out. Standing beside her. She messaged me later that night. Thank you for not walking away from us. I replied honestly. I walked away once so I could come back strong. Uncle James never brought up the house again. In fact, he avoided me completely. Funny how people stop joking when they realize you're not the punchline anymore. Months passed. Holidays felt different. Not perfect, but real. My parents asked instead of assuming. They listened instead of instructing. And I spoke, not to impress, but to be heard. One evening, my father asked me a question I waited my whole life to hear. How did you do it, all on your own? I smiled. I stopped waiting for permission. As I stood on the balcony of my home, city glowing beneath me, I realized something simple and powerful. The best revenge isn't success. It's peace. Peace that comes from knowing you built your life quietly, honestly, and on your own terms. And when the world finally noticed, you didn't need its approval. Life slowly settled into a new rhythm. My parents didn't call as often, but when they did, it wasn't to criticize or compare. It was to ask. To listen. That alone felt strange. One afternoon, my father asked if he could visit one of my properties. Not to inspect. Not to judge. Just to see. As I walked him through the building, he stayed quiet. Finally, he said, You built all this, without us. I didn't stop walking. Yes, I replied. But I carried you with me, whether you realized it or not. He nodded, ashamed but thoughtful. That day, he didn't give advice. He just said, I'm proud of you. And for the first time, it didn't feel late, it felt earned. Not everyone was happy about the change. A few relatives suddenly became very interested in my life. Cousins I hadn't heard from in years started calling. Old friends wanted business advice. And then came Uncle James. He showed up at my office unannounced. I've got a great investment idea, he said confidently. I smiled politely. I'm sure you do, I replied. He leaned forward. We're family. I looked him straight in the eye. Family doesn't embarrass you in public, I said calmly. Or disappear when you struggle. His smile faded. I didn't yell. I didn't argue. I simply said, I don't mix money with ego. He never came back. Months later, Olivia's wedding day arrived. This time, the spotlight felt different. As I stood beside her before the ceremony, she squeezed my hand. You know, she said softly, I used to think success was being chosen. I smiled. And now? Now I know it's choosing yourself. During the reception, my parents stood up not to boast, not to explain, but to say something simple. Our son taught us humility. People clapped. But I wasn't listening to them. I was watching my parents finally seeing me, not as a comparison, but as a person. Late that night, after the wedding ended, I returned home alone. The city lights were quiet. Steady. Honest. I thought about the journey. The silence. The struggle. The strength no one clapped for. And I realized something important. I never wanted validation. I wanted freedom. Freedom to build without permission. Freedom to succeed without announcing it. Freedom to forgive without forgetting. My story didn't begin when they noticed me. It began the day I decided. I was enough even if they never saw it. And that made all the difference. Success has a strange echo. After the wedding, life didn't suddenly become perfect, but it became clear. I started saying no more often. No to guilt. No to pressure. No to being available just because people remembered my name. And with every no, I felt lighter. One evening, my mother called, not to ask for help, not to complain. She said something unexpected. I tell people about you now, she admitted quietly. Not to brag, but to apologize for not seeing you sooner. I closed my eyes. That means more than you think, I said. A few weeks later, I received an email from a young investor, someone who had watched my journey from afar. How did you keep going when no one believed in you? I replied with one line. I believed in the version of myself no one else could see yet. I began mentoring quietly. No social media. No spotlight. Just honest conversations with people who reminded me of who I once was, hungry, scared, and unseen. I didn't save everyone, but I showed them what was possible. One night, standing alone in my office, I looked at the city below. The same city that once ignored me now worked for me. And that's when it hit me. Legacy isn't what you own. It's what you make possible for others. My parents gave me life, but I gave myself direction. And that changed everything.